welcome to Amy's Box of Chocolates. Today I am going to show you how to make some fire starters. My family and I have been having a good time using the fire pit in the backyard. And these are really helpful to get the fire started in the beginning. I had been given some of these as a gift, and we were almost out. So I wanted to make them, and I thought I would show you how to do that too. So basically what these are wax covered cotton rounds, and I just picked these up from the dollar store. So this is $1.25 and there's 80 of them, and I was able to make a full 80 with the candles that I used. So here's my bag full of fire starters, and yeah, it's not spaghetti sauce. This was just I double bagged some spaghetti sauce that I froze, and when my bags aren't messed up, the outer bag's not messed up, I use it for stuff like this. That's perfect. So I will show you the items that I used and how I did it, and hopefully you'll be able to make some for yourself. Okay, so the items that I used to make the fire starters were a pot with a smaller pot that actually fit inside to use as a double boiler. Now the silver one is an aluminum one that I purchased at Goodwill for pretty inexpensive. That way I don't have to worry about cleaning it out with all the wax in it and using it for food afterwards. I can just use that simply just for wax. And then I had a rubber spatula that I used. I just purchased that from the dollar store. The tongs I actually found at a Goodwill as well. And the cotton rounds were from the Dollar Tree. And the candles I had purchased at a Goodwill as well for really inexpensive. So if you can find them, you could probably find some at Dollar Tree, but Goodwill might be your best bet for getting a lot for very little. And I ended up using the 2 taper candles and just one of the pillar candles, and that made 80 of them for me. So I do still have the green one left. And then I used a cookie sheet with some parchment paper to lay out the waxed covered pieces. Okay, so a couple things I wanted to mention is you might want to put trivets underneath your cookie sheet just to make sure that the heat doesn't get onto your countertops. Also, I wore an apron because I didn't want to spatter wax all over me. So I just filled the bigger pot with some water, probably about 2 inches deep, and put the other pot inside, and then I tried to break my tapers to fit inside a little bit easier so that it would make contact with the heat and melt a little bit faster, which the tapers did melt pretty quickly. Now here I thought maybe I could cut the pillar candle down into pieces to help it melt a little bit faster, but that was going to take way too long, so I gave up and just put it in there, and it really didn't take very long to melt. I had the heat on probably medium, and there you can see the taper started melting really fast. So here I'm just grabbing the wicks out of there. Now you could save those and use those to make your own candles. For example, at the end you'll see that I had some leftover wax that I just put in a votive cup that I had, an empty votive cup. And so you could actually make it into a candle if you just put the wick in there while the wax was still melted. Okay, so here, these, the one that I've got right now has already been dunked one time. But I wondered if I needed it dunked again to thicken the wax on it, and so I tried that with a couple, but I really didn't notice a big difference in it, not enough that I thought it was worth doing. So I actually only tried it on a couple, and then I didn't mess with it anymore. Okay, so when I first started out, I started doing one at a time, and I would just dunk it and try to let it absorb into the cotton and then set it on the parchment paper. So that's how I did it for a little while. But, oh, and I did learn that when you move it, put another cotton pad underneath of it so it doesn't drip everywhere. So this project is kind of a good way to use up if you burn candles and you have some leftover wax. You can start collecting that and throw it in a pot, melt it up, and make your fire starters. So that's really a good way to use up some old wax that you would typically just throw away. Here is where I finally realized I could do multiples at a time. And you can see too that all of the wax is completely melted, so I don't have any candles in my way either. But I could throw in several at a time, and it doesn't hurt anything to do that. So that just went a lot faster to just throw them in there and then just pull them out. So once they start to cool, you can go ahead and start stacking them. You want to make sure that they're not warm at all and that they're not pliable, that they won't bend at all, and then you can stack them up. So I decided to play around a little bit and do some wax covered pine cones. So I dunked that for a while, and then I let that dry, and it didn't coat it very well. So I went back a little later after it had dried and dunked it again, but that didn't seem to help either. So what worked best was when I had turned off the stove and the wax was actually starting to cool. Then it started to get a little thicker and would stick to the pine cone. And it wasn't pretty, but I figured it'll do its job. So here's the tray of all my final fire starters. I used a couple of decorative cinnamon sticks that I didn't want anymore, and I dunked those just for fun, just to see what would happen. And I figured I could use those in my fire pit. I also have my votive cup of leftover wax that I had. I didn't want to open up my second package of cotton pads, so I just went ahead and just poured it in the votive cup for another time. I wanted to mention too that you may not feel comfortable using these in your fireplace. You may just want to use them outside in your fire pit, but I've used them in my fireplace before and I've never had a problem. Here's my tray of 80 fire starters, and yes, I've used them in my fireplace, and I feel like the wax eventually evaporates, so I don't really worry about it myself. So of course I had to try it out. So here I am lighting it. Now I did hold the flame there for a few seconds, several seconds, just to make sure that it took. It was a little bit of a breezy day, and it was actually hard to see the flame because it was so bright out. But yep, it took off and it did a great job. My family and I really enjoy sitting outside by the fire pit. Especially in the evening, we just have a chance to kind of relax and talk and catch up with each other. So we find that just a lot of fun, and it's a neat little family time for us. So I hope you'll give this a try, and if you do, post some comments to let me know what you think. All right, now go have fun and make some memories.